Preysight, Son of Darkness. Written by Tod Townsend. Narrated by A Vox in the Void. The name of Azall Thalac had grown until it had become a byword for terror across the breadth and width of the Eastern Fringe. He was the captain of the Night Lord's 47th Company, and he had lingered too long. From across the stellar wastes, the primarch had summoned him, seeking to gather his scattered sons to his side once more. Yet still he had lingered in the Delphana system for 3 weeks. 3 indulgent, blood-filled weeks that had seen another cut made in the fraying fabric of the false Emperor's fraudulent Imperium. The isolated backwater system proving too bountiful a prize for him to abandon so readily. Yet, those 3 weeks had come at a cost. Perhaps, had he heeded Kurz's command and recalled his legionaries the moment the astropathic communique had been received and deciphered, the fickle tides of the Imperium would have borne him swiftly back to the carrion world in time for him to attend his father's audience. Perhaps. Or perhaps not. The vagaries of warp travel rendered such speculations pointless, yet the possibility still preyed upon the Night Lord's mind, festering like an infected wound that refused to heal. And I have no one to blame. No one save myself, Thalac thought as he stood on the shadowed command deck of the Abyssal Dirge, his massive battle barge. Beside him, Ship Mistress Lezrytha all but sweated blood as she issued a constant stream of course corrections to her overworked bridge crew. Each new order punctuated by a scathing curse in a different Nostraman dialect as the Dirge and her escort frigates jockeyed for a suitable position at high anchor above the desolate orb of Tsagualsa. The murderous commanders of the 8th Legion had all arrived before him like crows drawn to a carcass. Sho Sahal, Vandrid Anrathi, Kor Mas, Clandra Quickblade, and Naraka the Bloodless, to name but a few. Even the young upstart Captain Krieg Achaebus had reached the Primarch's side ahead of him. The 47th was not merely late in returning. The 47th was the last company to return. The Lord Kurz was going to be displeased. Thalac's gauntleted hands clenched unconsciously at the thought, betraying his nascent unease. It had only been after the Dirge's turbulent translation back into real space that he had learned the Legion had been fully mustered in system not for days, nor weeks, but for months. His brother's midnight blue and bronze warships thronged the bridge's oculus screens in their hundreds, each one a void-faring colossus, capable of laying waste to entire worlds. In the last 3 minutes alone, Thalac had personally responded to over a score of hails and challenges, some from brother legionaries, others from harried human shipmasters who had barely bothered to address him in a manner befitting an Astartes of his exalted rank. Something was amiss. On any other occasion, such a colossal display of tardiness from a commander of Thalac's standing would have drawn the notice of his rival captains as surely as the scent of fresh blood draws the attention of prowling predators to a wounded prey beast. His peers would have wasted no time in subtly mocking his pathetic straggling response to the Primarch's summons, reveling shamelessly in his misfortune. Yet the voices of the legionaries who hailed him seemed dispirited and despondent even over the Vox, as if all vitality and sense of purpose had been bled from their hearts. Their once bitter resolve now supplemented by a bleak resignation. They cared nothing for his late arrival, and he found their lack of interest both vexing and concerning.
Lord Captain.
Forcing his fists to unclench, Thalac turned to regard his shipmistress with eyes as black and as pitiless as the airless void surrounding them. Lezrytha sat ramrod straight in the Dirge's command throne, exhaustion playing upon her pale face, though her Legion uniform remained immaculate as always, despite being stripped of all Imperial insignia. The ceaseless demands and pressures of her position had prematurely greyed her dark hair, and a faint tremor was detectable in her hand as she proffered the Legionary a data slate containing the battle barge's updated status reports.
The Dirge is as close to Tsagualsa as I dare to risk bringing her, my lord,
she said, too weary to maintain the air of cultivated formality she always utilized whenever she had to address him, though she was still careful to keep her eyes averted from his unhelmed face.
Any more maneuvering on my part will only incite Captain Vandred further.
Thalac bared his filed teeth in a predatory grin, amused at being the cause of his brother's discomfort. Vandred's own warship, the Covenant of Blood, was now close enough to be descried beyond the starboard viewports by the naked human eye. The Night Lord raised his left hand. 3 serrated adamantine blades, each one painted a bright arterial crimson, slid soundlessly from the housings of his lightning claw gauntlet. Lezrytha's heart rate spiked, and the trembling of her hand grew even more pronounced.
"Does my dear brother Vandred command this vessel, then?"
Thalac asked quietly, as he casually turned the blood-red blades this way and that, carefully examining each razor-keen tine as if searching for some flaw or imperfection only he could see.
No, my lord. You are our master and commander. I live only to carry out your will.
Lezrytha fought and failed to keep her voice steady. Savoring the fear seeping from her every pore, the Night Lord leaned in closer, the servo joints of his Mark V warplate purring smoothly. The woman instinctively shrank back, her jaw tightening and her breathing quickening as she struggled to keep her composure. She was bold and strong-willed for a human, and it always pleased Thalac to remind her of her fragile mortality.
"You are not going to live for much longer if you think the desires of my brothers should take precedence over my own,"
the legionary said with a soft hiss.
"The abyssal dirge will maintain stationary orbit at this anchorage, not because it is Vandred's will, but because it is mine. I do hope you are able to understand the difference between the two, Ship Mistress Lezrytha."
I understand perfectly, Lord Captain.
She replied with forced calm through gritted teeth, her suppressed anger almost as delectable as her fear. Thalac rested the tips of his claws on her shoulder, enjoying the way she flinched beneath their touch.
"Excellent. I am glad we are clear on the matter."
Ignoring the data slate she still held, he retracted the blades and strode to the end of the observation dais, overlooking the sunken multi-tiered command pit and the hundreds of human officers and chattering servitors who oversaw the dirge's myriad internal functions. He had been looking forward to joining his brother captains in the screaming gallery at the heart of Kurz's dark fortress. Now, the anticipation of standing in the Primarch's presence had crumbled to ash. For although the battle barge's cargo holds fairly groaned with plunder and fresh slaves, Thalac knew his crusade spoils would mean little in the grand scheme of things if the Night Haunter's displeasure was great enough to see his gauntlet stained with the sinner's red. Behind him, the bridge's thick adamantium blast doors rumbled open. Power-armored footfalls rang heavily upon the deck. Thalac did not turn. Even without his helmet's auto-sensors, he recognized the 2 legionaries by their distinctive treads and the unique servo growls emitted by their warplate. Unlike him, they had arrived precisely on time.
"You have served me well,"
he said, addressing the mortal crewmen at their workstations below him. Their bustling movements stilled, and their quiet talk ceased as they glanced up fearfully at the gene-forged transhuman who had deigned to regard them from his lofty perch.
"By your collective endeavors we have returned to Tsagualsa, the splendid new homeworld of our glorious Legion. For this you have my thanks. I go now to attend upon the Lord Kurz. Talon Master Vath will command the ship in my absence. You will follow his every order as if it were my own. Do not be found wanting in his sight."
He left the overlook before the stunned humans could formulate a response. Talon Master Vath, the most decorated and respected of Thalac's senior officers, stood beside the command throne, his eviscerator chainsword planted upright on the deck before him. Under his direction, a cadre of the company's most skilled artificers had cunningly refashioned his Corvus pattern helm to resemble that of a snarling jackal's skull. Yet it often seemed to Thalac as if the skull was grinning at him instead. Flanking the Talon Master, menacing and magnificent in a polished ceremonial suit of Mark IV power armor worthy of any Imperial parade ground, his ornate bat-winged helm held in the crook of one arm, stood Tod Townsend, the 47th's undefeated champion and Thalac's strong right hand. The legionary's long black hair was tied back in a warrior's horsetail, and his most recently acquired trophy weapon, a master-crafted thunderhammer torn from the dying grasp of an Imperial Fist lieutenant, was mag-clamped across his power pack.
Azall, brother.
Svaka greeted him with a slight bow, his deceptively soft voice almost serene in its measured cadence.
Since when are you in the habit of giving spontaneous thank you speeches to the crew, Captain?
Vath asked with brazen familiarity, his amusement evident even through his Vox speakers.
Since our father sent me a missive an hour ago demanding a private audience as soon as we reached upper orbit,
Thalac said, as he donned his old Mark III helmet.
You have overall command. If Captain Vandred starts whining about proximity margins again, tell him he should try moving his own shit junker of a ship for a change. In slightly more diplomatic terms, of course. Svaka alone shall accompany me to the surface. No other legionaries are to leave the dirge for any reason unless directly summoned by the primarch. By your will, Captain!
The Talon Master clashed an armored fist against his chestplate in acknowledgement. Yes, the Jackal's skull was indeed grinning.
Come, Talid,
Thalac said as he stalked impatiently from the bridge, his champion following at his heels.
We have kept Kurz waiting long enough.
Upon the barren, dust-swept surface of dead Tsagualsa, there was but one solitary bastion capable of sustaining human life. And from the depths of its deepest dungeons to the pinnacles of its highest towers, anarchy, pain, and the corrosive madness of a broken demigod held uncontested sway over all. As Thalac and Svaka ventured deeper into their father's stronghold, striding down long corpse-hung corridors that wept blood from black stone, and traversing vast excruciation chambers where captives and condemned slaves writhed and shrieked upon the skinning racks in their hundreds, the eyes of the gathered Night Lords silently tracked their passing from the shadows, the crimson lenses of their skull-faced helms glowing like smouldering embers in the fathomless gloom. No one challenged them or denied them ingress. The bleak despondency Thalac had sensed while in orbit hung over the Legion's commanders like a suffocating death shroud, and his unease increased as they drew closer to Kurz's throne room.
My, what a heartwarming homecoming this is turning out to be,
Svaka observed with dripping sarcasm. The champion had donned his own helm and spoke over an encrypted Vox channel only he and Thalac shared. He walked alongside his captain with a contemptuous swagger, the thunderhammer now held loosely in his left fist, wordlessly daring any of the watching Night Lords to challenge their passage.
Our brothers are waiting for something,
Thalac said, feeling the strain of expectation beginning to coil in the pit of his stomach.
Perhaps the Primarch intends to make an example out of us.
His muscles tensed involuntarily, the humiliating prospect of a public chastisement causing the unwelcome visions of red-stained gauntlets to grow more vivid in his mind's eye.
You lingered, Azall,
Svaka reminded him without rancor.
Not that I regret our actions. However, I do not believe our brother's anticipation has anything to do with the consequences of our belated return.
The Night Lord turned his head sharply to regard a squad of raptors loitering near the entrance to an armory.
Besides, you are not that unpopular, brother. At least not yet.
Thalac could not deny the champion's observation, especially as Svaka was quite correct on the last point. Just when it seemed the two legionaries would reach the screaming gallery without eliciting a confrontation, an enormous, heavily armored man-shape divorced itself from the shadows and stepped across their path. Thalac and Svaka came to an immediate halt. The name engraved in elegant Nostroman script across the venerable warrior's chestplate was familiar to Thalac. Though the last time the two of them had stood together in the same room, the legionary had been alive and pointing a blade at him in anger. Some things never changed.
You are late,
Captain core mass boomed in outrage from the Vox amplifiers of a Contemptor dreadnought chassis whose every available surface had been decorated with the flayed skins of aliens, humans, and space marines alike.
And you have gained an appalling amount of weight,
Thalac said acidly, refusing to be intimidated by his longtime rival. With a mechanical roar, core mass gunned the motor of a monstrous chain fist and brandished the brutal weapon at the two Night Lords in open challenge.
Stand down, Talid,
Thalac voxed urgently to Svaka.
Do not confront him. This is a fight you cannot hope to win.
How would you know? I have not yet faced a dreadnought in mortal combat,
Svaka said, his voice thick with frustrated battle lust.
He must answer for his arrogance, and I wield the perfect weapon that shall see him brought to his knees and humbled.
Stand down, or I will piss all over your steaming remains after he has finished rendering you down to your base elements. We do not have time for this. The Primarch is waiting.
Tell that to him,
snarled Svaka, as the walking gun casket core mass inhabited took a threatening step towards them, the teeth of its chain fist a shrieking blur, and its twin-linked las cannons aimed in their direction.
Insolent whoreson!
The enraged dreadnought bellowed.
We all gathered before our father's throne to heed his words as true and loyal sons should. All except you. So what were you doing, Thalac, Ambushing crippled Astarte strike cruisers out in the void? Tossing wailing children into skinning pits? What could have possibly taken a greater precedent over our father's will? I will garland myself with your entrails after I've made you beg for death. You and your pathetic headhunter.
Brother Captain Cormass, you do not have the right to challenge me until the Night Haunter himself has passed judgment upon my deeds.
Thalac said with icy calm, mindful to keep his hand away from his holstered Volkite Serpenter as he spoke. His unwavering gaze met the cluster of sensor nodes and picked feeds built into the Contemptor's recessed helm.
Curse has summoned me to an audience. My life, or my death, is for him alone to decide. Now get your oversized ass the hell out of my way. The Primarch must not be kept waiting.
There was a long moment of silence from the interred Night Lord. Then the whirring chain fist powered down, and the dreadnought retreated back into the shifting shadows, his Vox voice dropping to a low, bemused rumble.
That must mean you do not know that he has yet to tell you. Ah, how delightful. But you are heading in the wrong direction. Our father no longer holds court in the Screaming Gallery. He lurks now within the high chamber of his topmost tower. Perhaps he will forgive you, or perhaps he will rip out your hearts. It matters little either way. Vindication draws near, and we are forbidden from turning her blade aside.
Refusing to allow the dreadnought's cryptic ramblings to gain a foothold on his already anxious mind, Thalac backtracked for a quarter of a mile before turning left down a dark, unlit passageway whose walls were lined with thousands of silently screaming skulls. A seething Svaka stalked after him, his lightning claws and thunder hammer still unbloodied.
I am coming, father.
Thalac swore aloud within the confines of his helm as he began to ascend.
And if it is your will, neither I nor Svaka will ever leave your side again.
The corridor leading to the topmost chamber was paved with a macabre mosaic of human teeth, and it ended before a single arched doorway. Thalac's skin prickled, and his lips drew back from his teeth as his unease warred with the innate gene-bred desire to hasten to his father's side. The two Night Lords halted before a heavy door wrought of molecularly bonded bone. Curs laired within, waiting. No legionary stood sentinel outside his sanctum, not even a pair of the Atramentar Terminator elite. The Primarch had completely isolated himself. Stealing his hearts, Thalac faced Svaka and placed a gauntlet on his pauldron.
Will you stand alongside Talon Master Vath and champion his leadership, Talid?
You do not need to ask. It would not come to that,
Svaka said softly.
There is no time for sentimentality, brother. The warriors of the 47th will require a firm and resolute commander to lead them in the crusades to come. Vath is the most suitable candidate. Will you support him?
It will not come to that.
Vath is my chosen successor. Stand by him. Promise me this, tell it, if our friendship means anything to you.
You bastard.
Anger tainted the champion's words.
Yes, damn you. You have my promise. I will support Vath.
Thalac removed his helmet and maglocked it at his side, then pushed against the door. It swung smoothly open on silent hinges before fetching up against something soft and wet. The legionary entered the Night Haunter's lightless sanctum alone. Despite the frigid air, a slaughterhouse reek still permeated the bare, unfurnished room. Thalac's enhanced vision briefly marked the freshly dismembered corpses piled haphazardly about in the corners before his eyes settled upon the singular being occupying the center of the chamber. The primarch, Conrad Kurz, stood in front of a stone lectern, naked save for a tattered cloak of black feathers. A thick book bound in human skin lay open before him, and the scratching of his quill was akin to the scrabbling of rats' feet. It had been years since Thalac had last beheld his progenitor in the flesh. The decades following the War Master's defeat had been unkind to him, and his condition had gradually deteriorated until he was but a gaunt shell of his former self. Dried blood coated his hands, arms, and mouth, and his tangled hair fell in a filthy curtain about his pallid face. None of this mattered to Thalac. Without hesitation, he went down on one knee and saluted the Dominus Nox.
I am writing my autobiography,
the Primarch said without looking up.
It is almost finished. No one should ever read it.
Thalac remained silent, anticipating Kurz's rebuke.
You lingered,
the Night Haunter hissed. A sudden spasm jolted his body, and he set aside his quill.
I summoned you, and you lingered. I await your judgment, Father,
Thalac said. He bowed his head.
My judgment? Ah, no. I have no more judgments to pass upon this accursed galaxy, my son. The time for judgment has ended. The time for vindication comes. I am going to die.
Thalac's heart convulsed within his chest. The world stopped turning beneath his feet. He stared at Kurz in stark disbelief.
No. Yes.
The Primarch grinned, a hideous expression completely bereft of warmth or mirth.
My father's assassin draws near. Her ship has already entered the eastern fringe. She is coming for me, as I have long foreseen. No,
Thalac said again as he stood, fighting against the nameless dread threatening to swallow him.
I will stop her. I will kill her. I will gift you her head. I have named Talon Master Azall as my heir, since Sevatar is lost to me.
Kurz continued, as if he had not spoken.
He will lead the 8th after I am gone. My legionaries will war across the stars in an endless struggle for vengeance, their claws forever red with the lifeblood of my father's failed empire until the darkness claims them all, one by one. This is madness,
Thalac snarled, regaining some of his fortitude. Kurz cocked his head as if perplexed by his anger.
We are your sons, father. We would never allow such a fate to befall you. This assassin you speak of will not come within a...
The attack was as swift as it was unexpected. Thalac did not even see the Primarch move. Between the space of one heartbeat and the next, he was torn from his feet and flung across the room in a single motion to land atop a slick mound of mangled corpse parts. Before the Night Lord could regain his footing, Kurz appeared before him as if spewed forth from the very shadows. His rotting teeth bared, his eyes glittering obsidian pits, utterly devoid of all sanity and hope. The Primarch's nimble fingers were curled about the hilt of the legionary's long combat knife. Thalac could not even guess how he had taken it.
I will be vindicated,
Kurz said, expelling a waft of fetid breath so foul it made the Astartes want to vomit.
I have extracted an oath from every one of my captains to that effect. Each has sworn to me neither they nor their men will raise a hand against the assassin. She shall remain unopposed until the deed is done. You are the last Legion commander to return to Tsagualsa. I will hear your oath now.
How can you do this to us?
Thalac roared as the Night Haunter leaned over him.
We have all answered your summons. The Eighth has mustered in full. Let us leave this world together and forge a new path. Let the assassin hunt in vain amid the blood and carnage of our wake. Take us back to Terra, or into the Eye itself. Declare a new crusade, Father. Let the galaxy scream. You do not have to die here to prove some.
With an animalistic howl, Kurz seized him by the throat and held him aloft. White, hot pain blossomed as the Primarch punched him, once in the groin, thrice in the gut, the combat knife gripped in his fist like a punch dagger. Layers of powered ceramite did nothing to stop the blade from ripping in and out of him faster than his mind could register the damage. Then he was airborne once more. Something vital tore deep inside as he struck the blood-stained floor. Kurz pounced on him before he could rise.
My fate cannot be altered!
The Night Haunter screamed as he wrenched Thalac upright, manhandling him as easily if he were a mortal.
Swear! Swear to me you will not interfere! Swear or be left to rot in the dungeons forevermore! I will not stand idly by while you allow some damn bitch to...
He got no further. Kurz lifted him and ran him straight across the chamber. There was just enough time to realize what was about to happen, but not enough to stop it. Kurz himself pulled the blow at the last second. Thalac's reinforced skull met the far wall with a sickening crack. Kurz dropped him in an armored heap. He blacked out, only to regain consciousness a few seconds later. Blood was in his hair, and a veil of crimson clouded his vision. He thought he saw Kurz towering above him, the knife poised to cut his throat. He blinked uncertainly, and then it was Svaka standing over him, crackling energies coiling about the head of his raised thunderhammer.
Do not kill my captain, Father.
The champion's voice was as cold as a frozen grave.
Why?
The Primarch asked, pacing closer.
I have found him wanting. He is unworthy of your fealty.
Because he defies you out of loyalty,
Svaka said.
He is true to you. And because he is my friend. He is my only friend.
Thalac grimaced inwardly at the legionary's naked honesty and dragged himself into a kneeling position. His entire skull felt as if it was on the verge of coming apart.
Is that so?
Kurz ran a dark tongue across his thin lips.
Ah, what a pity. There is so little trust to be found in friendship. I once counted Fulgrim as a friend, before he betrayed my confidence to Dawn at Charo. Tell me, is your brother worth dying for? Is he worth suffering for? Is he truly worthy of such selfless devotion?
In answer, Svaka extended the red blades of the lightning claw gauntlet affixed to his right hand. They were identical in every way to those Thalac wielded with his left, for the gauntlets were a matched pair, intended for a single warrior. Kurz misinterpreted the gesture.
You have more spine than the rest of my captains combined.
A fell light kindled in the mad Primarch's eyes. To Thalac's horror, he dropped into a feral crouch, bringing his throat level with the champion's claws. Smiling, he spread his arms wide and tilted back his head invitingly.
Save your captain, then. Do what the Emperor should have done the night he first embraced me. Do what Sanguinius and the Lion would not. Change my fate. Prove the vision false. Kill me yourself.
Svaka trembled, overcome by dread and uncertainty. The red blades reached forwards. Their tips pricked the Primarch's alabaster skin. Kurz closed his eyes. Thalac bit back a scream. The whole universe seemed to hold its breath. No. No. Svaka stepped back, his limbs visibly shaking. The lightning claws retracted back into their housings. The thunderhammer crashed to the floor. Svaka sank to his knees beside Thalac. I cannot. You are still our father, even if that no longer means anything to you. I have killed many things. I would not number my gene-sire among them. The Night Haunter rose once more to his full height, drawing his feathered cloak about him like a pair of ragged wings, and a measure of his former majesty returned.
My father, my brothers, and now my sons, all have failed me. Now you see my fate is fixed. Vindication is mine.
The Primarch glared down at the stricken legionaries kneeling at his feet and pointed towards the door with the bloodied combat knife.
Depart from me, Captain Thalac. Take what remains of the 47th and depart. Do not return. The darkness waits for you. Darkness and an eternity of slaughter and death. Consider this my last command. No. Consider it my last wish.
Father!
Thalac cried out in abject despair, unable to resist as Svaka gripped his power back and began dragging him from the chamber.
Father! Do not leave us! Do not forsake your sons!
Go. You will not give me your oath. You are no longer my son.
Thalac's mind fell into a bottomless abyss. Incomprehensible words of denial spilled from his blood-flecked lips. His vision dimmed, and he thrashed and clawed at Svaka's armor like a witless beast as the champion hauled him out into the corridor. The door was shut. An anguished scream tore free of his throat. Svaka cursed and drove a fist into his face, causing him to lose consciousness a second time. When awareness returned, he found himself being carried across his brother's shoulders back through the fortress. Svaka had reattached his helm, and screeds of injury and trauma data were scrolling across the visor display. The wounds Kurz had inflicted upon him were severe. Thalac was beyond caring.
Who am I, Telid?
He whispered numbly.
Who am I, if I am not his son?
You are Azall Thalac of the Red Knives, commander of the 47th, Svaka said, his warplate servos squealing in protest beneath Thalac's additional weight. You stand in midnight clad, and you are my friend. These truths have not changed, brother.
Kurz cannot do this,
Thalac gasped.
The power vacuum alone, it will tear our brotherhood apart. The Legion will disintegrate. Sure, Sahar does not have the strength of will to keep the Night Lords united.
That is not our concern. We have our orders. The Primarch has spared you for a purpose. We will avenge him together. We will ensure the Imperium never forgets his name. Our blades will be painted red for all eternity.
Telid, brother, when we get back to the Abyssal Dirge, I'm going to break out some casks of that leftover Fenrisian Mjord and drink myself into oblivion. Will you join me?
Azall, the last time I drank Mjord with you, I woke up with a headache so debilitating I nearly threw myself out of an airlock. I was also wearing Vath's armor for some reason.
My head already hurts.
No shit. You should have left your helmet on.
My hearts feel like they are dying.
So do mine. Our pain shall fuel our vengeance. We will cut and kill everything that stands in our path until there is nothing left for us to cut or to kill. Are you with me, brother captain?
Like when we were boys,
Thalac murmured, clotting blood dribbling from his lips.
Yes, I am with you. Thank you, Telid.
For what?
For defending me.
I am your champion, Azall. I will always defend you. The blackness claimed Thalac again, and he knew no more as Svaka bore him away into a shared exile and the eternal darkness of a grim and fatherless future. Facing the night.
No.
The Prey's voice is barely above a whisper, yet Vath hears it clearly despite the clamoring of ancient machinery and the echoing screams of the warband's latest victims. It is not a plea for mercy or respite. Rather, it is a statement, a declaration of purpose. The human he is hunting has stopped running. Vath pauses in his pursuit, intrigued despite himself. The mortal stands under one of the few flickering lumens still illuminating the primary maintenance tunnel. Beads of sweat glisten on his shaven scalp as he trembles, soiling the recycled air with his fierce stench. The man is an indentured menial, unarmed and incapable of harming Vath in any way. His powerlessness is beyond contemptible. And yet, the Prey turns, eyes straining in vain to glimpse his shadow-shrouded stalker. His hands curl into white-knuckled fists.
No,
he whispers again, expelling the word through gritted teeth.
I'm not going to run anymore. Face me, you coward. Come out and face me like a man.
The Night Lord obliges. He paces from the preternatural gloom, the concealing shadow shifting about his body like a cloak woven of sentient darkness. The renegade Astartes advances upon the menial, striding forward at a leisurely pace, giving the man's unenhanced mind ample time to drink its terrified fill of his midnight-clad form. Vath spreads his arms so the Prey can better see the knives, the grisly trophies of skins and skulls adorning his blood-stained warplate and the huge eviscerator chainsword clamped across his power pack. Behind the snarling visage of his jackal skull helm, Vath keeps his gaze fixed on the man's haggard face, awaiting the moment when his newfound defiance crumbles. When his terror eclipses his courage and he either flees once more or falls to his knees screaming for mercy or for the false emperor to deliver him. Yet the man does not run, nor does he plead for his life. He does not cower or babble worthless prayers, he merely stands fast, fists clenched as the Night Lord stalks closer. Vath comes to a halt just within striking distance. The man shudders and twitches, consumed by dread yet refusing to succumb to it. Vath is glad the two of them are alone. Few amongst his brothers are capable of appreciating such rare displays of audacity.
Now we face one another, mortal.
Vath hisses softly through his helm's Vox speakers.
I am the bringer of the night, the terror that haunts the darkness between the stars. I am the avenging talon of a murdered god, and I have come for you. Kneel before me, and I might grant you a clean death.
No, I only kneel to the god Emperor.
The menial remains obstinate despite his fear. Extending a gauntleted hand, Vath seizes him by the front of his oil-stained coveralls and hauls him effortlessly into the air. The man does not resist except to grip the Night Lord's wrist, his expression still defiant. Vath draws his favorite knife and presses the tip of the blade against the menial's stomach. The man snarls and spits at him even as his bladder lets go. He will squeal like a pig when gutted, but he will not beg for death. Vath can read as much in his eyes. Admiration stirs in his heart, almost against his will.
You are brave, mortal, though no amount of courage or cowardice shall save you. Still, your skills can be put to far better uses than maintaining this wretched relay station.
My warship is always in need of strong, capable slaves able to keep her spiteful old bones void-worthy. You will play your part in the long war, corpse worshipper. Consider it the reward your defiance has reaped.
Vath sheathes his knife and retraces his steps, carrying the menial before him. The man begins to struggle in earnest, the prospect of spending the rest of his life toiling in the bowels of a Night Lord's warship more horrifying than excruciation. He kicks and thrashes uselessly in the traitor Marine's grip in a fit of impotent fury that only betrays the true extent of his helplessness.
No, you bastard! You traitor! You attacked and slaughtered my friends, then you hunted down the survivors like animals for sport! I will never serve you. Do you hear me, false angel? I will never be your slave.
The Night Lord chuckles, reveling in the despairing panic underlying the man's hollow threats.
Then you should have just kept on running. Who knows? Perhaps you might have gotten away.
The menial's resolve finally cracks and he begins to scream at last. Vath is almost disappointed. Still, they all scream in the end, the bold and the craven alike. One day the false emperor himself will scream when the sons of the Night Haunter come for him and cast him down in fire and ruin from his throne of lies. Vath grins at the thought, his black abyssal eyes alight with anticipation. One day Kurz will be avenged. One day the 8th Legion will be vindicated, even if the long war must rage on for another 10,000 years. But until then, let the galaxy scream. Preysight, Part 1. Night had come. Smoke from Captain Tiresias's funeral pyre rose into a tortured sky already thick and choking with the flames of hundreds of ongoing conflagrations raging through the once proud city. The most impressive light show dominated the skyline to the east. There, vast swathes of the temple district were ablaze as ravenous tongues of fire licked up to devour the cracked domes and shattered spires of bombed-out imperial cathedrals and arms houses. 6 hours had passed since Garrick Rivenstone II, Lord Governor of Sychanthis III, had openly broadcast his personalized message of unconditional surrender across the single, planet-wide Vox band intentionally left under his control. Yet still the capital burned. The blood of its citizens ran through its death-haunted streets, and the screams of mortal terror and agony went on and on. For the few humans destined to survive, it was a night that would never truly end. A night that held no promise of a dawn. A night that would live on in their souls and minds long after the invaders had left their world. A night that would claim them as inevitably as the monsters who had unleashed it had claimed their loved ones and murdered all hope. Yet on this night, Telid Svaka had distanced himself from the labors and indulgences of his brethren. Shrouded in shadow, the legionary stood sentinel downwind of the pyre, his menacing bat-winged skull-visored helmet clutched reverently in the hands of Shazar, his favored thrall. The corpse-white skin of his cadaverous face glowing a sinister orange in the light of the fire. He gazed into the dancing flames like a man hypnotized, his void black eyes fixated on the power-armored body being consumed, indifferent to the stench of roasting flesh, silent and immovable. He had kept the lonesome vigil for over 2 hours and none had disturbed his watch. Shazar, sitting cross-legged beside him, stifled a cough as she dutifully wiped the ash flecks from the pitted ceramite surface of the Night Lord's helm.
"It was a good fight then, Lord,"
she rasped quizzically. her voice rendered brittle and harsh by age and privation. Curiosity had gotten the better of her. The midnight-clad demigod towering above her nodded faintly, his unblinking eyes never leaving the smoking pyre.
Yes, he was a worthy opponent. Likely the last I'll ever face.
Svaka's voice was deceptively soft, his words carefully measured, yet his tone was laced with a cold undercurrent of bitter fury that never failed to send shivers down Shazar's spine each time he spoke. Before them, the mortal remains of Captain Tiresias of the Howling Griffins chapter burned, just as the world he and his battle brothers had failed to protect now burned. This was a puzzling new development to Shazar, for as far as she knew, Svaka had never treated a defeated foe, living or dead, with anything approximating respect. Still, she was wise enough not to inquire into the matter. Though Svaka treated her far better than her former master, she feared one question too many might kindle his ire. So she lapsed back into a respectful silence, grateful of the heat warming her weary bones, and deeply honored the solitary legionary had permitted her to keep this unusual vigil alongside him. Such a prolonged stretch of peaceful contemplation was not fated to last. Svaka sensed the other Night Lord's approach long before he stepped openly into the pyre light. His brother's soiled power armor reeked of the fresh blood and viscera of his most recent victims, and the lingering psychic residue of their collective suffering clung like a miasmic cloak about his body. Svaka remained motionless, his gauntleted hands resting upon the gold-gilded crossguard of the master-crafted broadsword set upright before him. He waited. Let them come for him, if they dared. Though unhelmed, Svaka's enhanced senses were hyper-attuned to his surroundings at all times, and even those within the warband whose stealth abilities had been honed or elevated to preternatural levels knew well to tread warily when his back was turned. Still, many of his brethren, particularly the ambitious new bloods, would covet Captain Tiresias' magnificent blade. A few might even attempt to steal it from him. Svaka mused briefly on whom amongst them had any hope of succeeding, then smiled in mirthless welcome as Talon Master Vath separated himself from the shadows and paced up to the pyre, his eviscerator chainsword resting casually over one studded pauldron. Blood dripped like crimson tears from the blade's jagged teeth to spatter in dark blooms across the white marble flagstones. The laureled helmet of a Howling Griffin's veteran sergeant now held pride of place at the Night Lord's trophy belt, and his fresh mantle of flayed human skins flapped wetly in the ashen breeze. Shuddering, Shazar lowered her head and pulled her cowl down over her face in an effort to appear as non-threatening and inconspicuous as possible.
Ah, so this is where you've been lurking.
Vath chuckled dryly, his sardonic vox-distorted voice poisoning the relative silence of the courtyard.
How considerate of you to cut off all communication. Tracking you down proved an irksome diversion, though doubtless my presence here comes as no surprise.
The Night Lord cocked his head to one side like a raptor, as he made a show of analyzing the pyre Svaka had built and the body burning upon it before snorting in bemusement.
Tell me you at least had the decency to feast on his gene seed before consigning his flesh to the flames.
Svaka ignored the jibe.
You appear to have hunted well, brother, in spite of the diversion,
he said quietly, drawing attention to Vath's newly acquired trophies.
Has your Talon suffered any losses?
Vath tapped the Howling Griffin helmet with an armored forefinger.
This bastard slew Nurks, and a new blood resigned by the time I pounced on him. He'd already been wounded, so overpowering him was easy.
It always gives me such pleasure to reduce Gilliman's oh-so-noble sons to the level of butchered swine. In the end, his courage did not serve him, nor did his honor shield him.
Vath paused abruptly and glowered at Svaka across the pyre of flames, the eye lenses of his snarling jackal skull helm glowing a malevolent crimson.
Why have you done this, Telid? Lord Thalac is displeased, and because he is displeased, I have come for you. Captain Tiresias was supposed to be taken alive.
Unperturbed, Svaka sneered, exposing his filed, blood-stained teeth. I fought Tiresias blade to blade, Vath, not Thalac. I defeated Tiresias in open combat before the Halakan Gate, not Thalac. The Howling Griffin's commander was mine, to do with as I pleased. To the victor goeth the spoils. That has ever been the warband's way. Besides, he was a masterful opponent. His sword skills were exquisite. He tested my prowess as it had not been tested in decades. I almost felt like a true legionary again. Granting him a swift death was the sincerest show of gratitude I could bestow, given the circumstances.
That may be true,
Vath conceded begrudgingly.
though Thalac might be inclined to see otherwise. But this...
The Night Lord swept a hand over the blazing pyre in a theatrical motion.
Slinking off to burn the body when it ought to have been flayed and crucified to the gateway to further demoralize the populace and magnify our might. It's almost as if you're ashamed you killed him. It's almost as if you're trying to honor him.
The Talon Master shook his head, as if unable to even entertain the thought.
You must answer for this, Telid. The capital belongs to us now. The last of the Imperial defenders have been routed. Thalac has set up court in Governor Rivenstone's palace, and soon the judgments and executions will begin. I've been sent to bring you in. You should also know that Haranzar wishes to speak with you.
Haranzar. At the mention of the Chaos Sorcerer's name, the blood seethed like boiling acid through Svaka's veins and his heart quickened in bitter hatred. Haranzar, he snarled contemptuously, fixing Vath with a stare so blackly murderous, it would have caused an entire slaughter host of the lost and the damned to fall to their knees and plead for mercy. Haranzar, who leads the warband from the shadows behind Thalac's throne. Haranzar, the fanatical proselytizer of the thirsting gods. Haranzar, whose gene line is not that of the 8th Legion. Haranzar, the rogue librarian who seeks to subvert our brotherhood and remake it in his image.
Enough of this tirade,
Vath growled, raising the bloodied eviscerator and caressing the activation rune with his thumb.
Come with us quietly, brother. Thalac is waiting. The situation can still be salvaged if you are willing to swallow your pride.
Haranzar, who wanted Tiresias captured alive, so he could subject the loyal captain to ritual torment and defilement upon a desecrated imperial altar for the continued blessings of his demonic patrons. Just as he did with that Black Templar chaplain at Houskensburg Keep, and those two lamenters following the massacre at Candor's Point.
Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be.
Behold, I have deprived that conniving sorceress dog of his prized sacrifice. Svaka spat in bitter triumph as he gripped the hilt of the Howling Griffin's broadsword and swept the gleaming blade skyward. I ripped Tiresias' hearts apart with my claws after triumphing over him in mortal combat,
and I have consigned his remains to the consuming flames so that none might lay claim to them. Such is my right. I respected and honored Thalac before he allowed Tsar's stratagems to take precedence over the counsels of his own veteran warriors. I'll not abase myself at his feet and entreat his leniency for refusing to cater to the whims of a chaos-enthralled witchblood who would manipulate us all for his own self-serving ends. Go and tell that to our illustrious Captain Vath, if you dare.
The Night Lord shook his head, barely restrained violence tainting his each word.
No. As Lord Thalac's champion, you can inform him of these grievances yourself. Will you heed his summons? Or must we drag you back to the palace with all the courtesy afforded to a disgraced traitor?
Svaka grinned without humor and shrugged, his abyssal eyes bottomless pits of derision. The night is still young, brother. Do you like my beautiful new broadsword? Fight me, and it shall be yours, if you emerge victorious. Vath stared at him for a long moment, his true expression unreadable behind his helm.
Curse his claws, tell it. Do you have a death wish? Or do you simply not give a damn anymore?
Svaka brandished Tiresias's blade at the Talon Master, as something that might have been grief contorted his face. I am the only legionary who gives a damn, Vath. He snarled between clenched teeth. Are we the sons of the Night Haunter? Or are we the playthings of capricious gods? Do you not see what is happening to us? Are you completely blind as to how we've strayed from the Primarch's ideals? Thalac once prosecuted the Long War in a manner befitting a true Astartes of the 8th Legion. Now he consorts openly with a sorcerer not of our heritage, and partakes in profane rituals for the sake of greater power and infamy. And the new bloods, the young milksop heirs of Curse in this decrepit age, will seek to follow his example. Our warband is dying, Vath. Like the false Emperor's Imperium, it rots away from within. Tsar is a cancer that must be excised if we are to remain true to the spirit of our brotherhood and to our father's last wishes. The Talon Master shifted his stance slightly, like a long-extinct Nostraman saber-toothed lion preparing to spring.
You truly are an arrogant cur, if you honestly think you're the only legionary who...
A wet, gargling roar of rage burst out of nowhere and everywhere, as a sudden wave of frigid air blasted across the courtyard. The shadows twisted and writhed, like living things in torment. The pyre flames wavered and waned as if fear-stricken. The 7 remaining Night Lords of Vath's Talon stood revealed in all their nightmarish splendor, their steel chain blades running with gore, their helms' eye lenses blazing to blood-red life as they were stripped of their preternatural concealment. Shazar cried out in alarm, her voice shrill and piercing. Swifter than the human eye could follow, Svaka whirled about, igniting the broadsword's disruptor field and extending the serrated blades of his lightning claw gauntlet. He was not fast enough. The unnatural cold stabbed into the Night Lord's body as if his armor did not exist, chilling his blood and deadening his limbs. Hoarfrost spread across the flagstones beneath his feet and rhymed the contours of his warplate. His skin crawling in revulsion at the psychic contact, Svaka strained with every ounce of his gene-forged strength to fall upon the monstrous figure now standing revealed before him. A tall figure, clad in onyx-black power armor, devoid of all insignia or allegiance save for the sigil of the 8-fold star emblazoned upon his chestplate. Haran Zar's multi-hued eyes shone like dying stars in a skinless, bestial face, utterly bereft of any semblance of humanity. Malformed fangs and curving tusks jutted from his elongated jaws, and a pair of curling, rune-engraved horns crowned his misshapen head. The Chaos Space Marine stank of eons old blood and the ruination of worlds. His bandolier of Astarte skulls rattled against his armor, and at his hip was shackled Soul Reaver, his accursed demon sword. Svaka's hearts clenched in disgust as Zar brought his mutated visage within inches of his own, strings of bloody saliva drooling from his lacerated tongue. Svaka could not strike at the sorcerer, for the penetrating cold constrained him as effectively as any physical binding. Despite the mental barriers he had raised, Zar's words slid into his mind with all the ease of a flensing knife, slicing into naked flesh.
You dare defy my will and deny me my prey. Captain Tiresias was supposed to be taken alive.
Svaka struggled to draw in breath. His lungs felt full of razored ice shards. Speaking took monumental effort.
Perhaps if you spent less time whispering the dubious promises of the Neverborn into Thalac's ears, and more time fighting in the vanguard like a true warrior, you would have reached Tiresias before I did.
Zar snarled like a Carnodon and raised his right hand. The psi-reactive blades of his force talons were wreathed in a pale blue balefire that bedazzled the unwary eye. The corrupted librarian rested the tines upon Svaka's breastplate, pressing them against the leering bat-winged skull motif that had served as the Night Lord's primary emblem since before the Great Betrayal. Zar did not drive the claws in. There was no need. Malignant energies coursed across the battle-worn surface of Svaka's ancient Mark IV warplate. Searing agony flooded into the Night Lord's body, channeled directly into his nervous system via the neural ports linking his armor's fiber bundles to his black carapace. The legionary's body spasmed uncontrollably, and his mouth jerked open in a soundless scream. Blood streamed from his nose and eyes as Zar spoke within the depths of his mind.
You have deprived the primordial pantheon of their rightful due, tell it, Svaka. Your life and soul are forfeit. You should rejoice that your lord seeks to expand his horizons beyond the petty reaving and raiding your ilk are so infamous for. The limitless majesty of the warp shall fill Thalac, and he will come to the knowledge of true power. I desire only to illuminate him and to guide him further along the path of his ascension. Yet you would have him remain as he has been for millennia, a mere legionary, his desires trammeled, his ambitions stymied. Why? Why fight against the inevitable? The final triumph of chaos cannot be stopped. You, too, could have been great. A true lord of terror and a worthy champion of the gods. Instead, you would rather abide by the twisted ideals of a broken primarch who loathed his own gene sons. What wasted potential! Yet you can still serve. You shall take Captain Tiresias' place. The Pantheon will have their sacrifice. I will ensure it.
Enough!
Vath sounded distant, as if he was speaking from across the other end of the galaxy. With visible reluctance, Zar withdrew his force talons and stepped back. The phantom pain dissipated, and the deadly cold bled away from Svaka's stiffened limbs, leaving behind only an aching emptiness. Swiftly, he steadied himself and rallied, his weapons held at the ready. Vath's Night Lord swept in and surrounded him like dark specters, culled from a child's nightmare. Shazar began to weep piteously. The Talon Master strode around the pyre and interposed himself between his men and the librarian.
Lord Thalac has commanded me to fetch his wayward champion Zar. I let you have your say, but I will not allow you to subject Svaka to any ritualistic obscenities until he has pronounced his judgment upon him.
A pointless gesture. Thalac will hand him over to me regardless.
the Chaos Marine insisted, pointedly caressing Soul Reaver's pommel with his left hand.
I am owed his life at the very least. I will make him suffer 100-fold for his impudence. Otherwise, the gods will be displeased and may withdraw their favor from us.
The fickleness of your gods does not concern me, sorcerer.
Vath spat, his contempt for the Psyker evident.
My Talon will be escorting Svaka back to Governor Rivenstone's palace, as per Thalac's orders. You may ride along with us in our rhino, if walking holds no appeal.
Zar gnashed his fangs and stamped a clawed foot down into the ground with enough force to splinter the stonework.
Svaka is mine, Vath. Mine to do with as I please. Stand aside. The gods will not be denied.
Then join me, Zar, Svaka said quietly. The Night Lords about him tensed as one, as if collectively catching the scent of freshly spilled blood. Svaka continued. You accused me of stealing your prey, and perhaps I did, but you yourself did nothing to make such a claim upon Tiresias legitimate. I am the one who challenged the Howling Griffin captain, and I am the one who slew him. If you wish for me to take his place, then you must fight me as I fought him, blade to blade, eye to eye. If you best me, then I'll be completely at your mercy, and none of my brothers will stay your hand. But only if you prove yourself the superior swordsman. Unable to smile, Zar licked his mangled lips in eager anticipation.
I accept your challenge gladly, Svaka. Humbling you will be my pleasure. It is one thing for the blind slaves of the false emperor to resist the revelations and gifts of the Pantheon. But for a legionary such as you, one who has borne witness to the glories wrought by the gods and the myriad blessings they can bestow, the impiety and lack of reverence you display is intolerable. After I've torn the flesh from your bones and offered up your wretched soul for the Neverborn to feast upon, I will lay your helmet at the foot of Thalac's throne, and he will rejoice that one less obstacle stands between him and the path to demonhood.
So be it. But first you must defeat me, Svaka replied coldly, as his brethren withdrew back into the shadows at a private Vox command from the Talon Master. Tears still streaming down her face, Shazar crawled forward on her knees and proffered Svaka his helmet. The Night Lord shook his head and waved her away. He did not fully trust his helm's auto-senses when it came to analyzing and targeting warp-empowered creatures such as Zar, who could mangle and twist reality as they wished. His own gen-hanced eyes would serve him well enough for this engagement. No psycho tricks, he warned as the sorcerer drew Soul Reaver from its Eldari skin scabbard, the air around the demon sword shimmering as if in pain as it came into contact with the possessed blade. This shall be decided by blades alone.
Of course,
the librarian responded with a condescending bow.
You did not overcome Tiresias by immaterial means, after all. It is only fitting that I refrain, though it shall not avail you.
Svaka knew he could not hold Zar to any promise, even though, for all his potent psychic abilities, the Chaos Marine was a ferocious close-quarters combatant when it suited him. As they began to slowly circle one another, Svaka allowed himself a second to consider Vath's unanswered question. Did he have a death wish? Perhaps. Bitterness and ennui had become closer companions than his own battle brothers. Nothing he did brought him any lasting satisfaction. He hunted, he slaughtered, and he tortured, with all the passion of a servitor. Only his hatred of the librarian had sustained him over the past century. Now Zar intended to sacrifice him to the denizens of the warp. Svaka knew no fear. This was a confrontation that should have taken place decades ago, death wish or no. The infection Zar had become needed to be purged if the warband was to have a future. even if liberating Thalac's mind from the sorcerer's enticements was to be his final act of service to the 8th Legion. The Night Lord licked his own lips as his anticipation rose to the fore. He would not fail. Not in this. Not when the very soul of his brotherhood hung in the balance.
Ave! Dominus! Nox!
Telid Svaca roared and charged. Preysight, Part 2.
Ave! Dominus! Nox!
Telid Svaca roared as he closed at last with his hated foe. Captain Tiresias's broadsword blazing like a purifying firebrand in his left hand, as if the weapon's machine spirit was just as eager to spill the Chaos Marine's tainted blood as he was. Haran Zar responded in kind, his inhuman eyes alight with the promise of victory, the demon sword Soul Reaver, wreathed in an insidious miasma of hunger and death. The courtyard lit up as the two blades clashed in an outpouring of conflicting energies. Battle stimulants and combat hormones burned through the Night Lord's bloodstream as he gave himself wholly over to the destruction of his nemesis. His ennui vanished, and a terrible, all-devouring joy arose to take its place. A joy he had briefly reveled in during his duel with the Howling Griffin. The joy of a being created solely for war, finding an opponent worthy of his prowess. The two gene-forged demigods whirled about the funeral pyre, trading blows that would have broken the bodies of any human. Their swords and claws a blur, yet there was a profound difference in their objectives. Zar strove to cripple and subdue. Svaca fought exclusively to kill. The sorcerer's forced talons tore great rents in the Night Lord's armor, steadily sapping his strength with each fresh wound, while Svaca struggled to breach Zar's defenses and land a decisive mortal blow. The Night Lord paid no heed to his injuries, and instead devoted the whole of his focus to exploiting any lapse in the Chaos Marine's judgment. He began to decrease the vigor of his attacks, allowing Zar to believe he had the upper hand even as his own blood continued to flow. Sensing his prey weakening, Zar pressed his advantage, forcing Svaca to go on the defensive and driving him up against the base of the pyre in a shower of sparks. Their swords locked, and once more Zar's slavering jaws hovered mere inches from the Night Lord's sweat-streaked face, the glistening flesh of his exposed musculature pulsating with unholy vitality.
Blade to blade, eye to eye, just as you desired.
The Chaos Marine taunted, as Svaca managed to block the sorcerer's questing talons with his own lightning claws at the last second to keep from being disemboweled.
If battle remains the only action left that brings you joy, then why not kill for the eternal glory of Khorne? The Blood God might yet endow you with the power to triumph over me this night, if you are worthy enough to call upon him for strength.
What the gods give with their right hand, they take with their left.
Svaca snarled as he marshaled his strength and thrust the librarian back several paces.
You're just a slave, Zar. A mere plaything to the abominations you so ardently worship. You style yourself as Thalac's invaluable advisor, when you're not even worthy to clean the gore from his armor. Though, perhaps if you'd been born a dog, you could have earned a place at his side by licking the blood from his boots.
Zar howled in outrage and lunged at him, his eyes aflame with utter hatred. The numbing cold speared into Svaca's body and enveloped his limbs once more, retarding his reflexes. This time he was not quick enough to parry the sorcerer's blows. Blinding agony ripped through his arm as Soul Reaver severed his left hand at the wrist. Tiresias's broadsword struck the ground with a fateful clatter of steel on stone. Streaks of white flashed across Svaca's vision, and he gasped aloud as Zar drove his forced talons into his stomach and twisted them.
Now you will suffer the torments of the damned, Telid. Now the gods shall have their due.
The Chaos Marine wrenched the talons free, and the Night Lord fell to his knees as a cascade of blood drenched his groin and thighs. Zar sheathed the demon sword and gripped him by the rim of his gorget. Svaka tried to bring his lightning claws to bear, but his arm was leaden, and he no longer possessed the strength to wield the blades. The Psyker loomed over him now seemingly grown massive and monstrous, as he channeled the raw energies of the Imperium into his corporeal form. Svaka was dragged to his feet, as if he weighed nothing. The runes adorning the sorcerer's horns flared to golden life, the ruinous symbols and sigils pulsing with infernal power. Haran Zar lowered his head. He opened his dripping jaws, and kept on opening them. Wider and wider they yawned, until they gaped wide enough to swallow the Night Lord whole. Hell awaited within. Svaka beheld an endless roiling landscape of elemental insanity, a churning, writhing sea of unspeakable colors, impossible geometries, screaming souls and ravenous, ever-shifting Neverborn. Eternal and unconquerable, the warp seethed in anticipation. A million eyes gazed hungrily upon Svaka, and a million mouths whispered his name in welcome. It hardly mattered if what he was witnessing was real, or a psychic projection conjured within his mind. Madness beckoned. Damnation loomed. Clawed fingers and barbed tentacles seized his limbs as a host of demons swarmed about him and dragged him to a high altar formed of fused bones and melted flesh. Resistance was futile. The sacrifice would be carried out. The ruinous powers would be appeased. Thalac would ascend, become something unrecognizable to his brethren. It was inevitable. He had failed, and the price of failure was... "My lord!" Svaka's eyes snapped open. He gasped for breath. The reality of the courtyard reasserted itself in a bedlam of noise and violence. Bolters barked. Chainblade screamed. He was on his knees again, his lower extremities bathed in blood. Shazar was at his side, hammering the butt of her las pistol against his pauldron in an attempt to rouse him. Before him a scene of chaos unfolded, an alternate vision of madness. Haran Zar roared and raged as he lashed out with both sword and sorcery as the Night Lords of Vath's Talon attacked him on all sides. Dark gouts of his blood spraying across his assailants' midnight blue armor as their revved chain blades tore into his body. One of Zar's horns had been sheared off, and a portion of his lower jaw had been blasted clean away. A Night Lord had already perished, brutally bisected from collarbone to hip. Fell lightning arced from the tines of the sorcerer's force talons, enveloping two more legionaries in multicolored witchfire as Soul Reaver parried the blows of Vath's enormous eviscerator. The Talon Master was fighting with all the fury of a World Eater berserker, ancient Nostraman death curses blaring from his Vox amplifiers at maximum volume, his jackal-jawed helm appearing to grin as the Psyker's blood spattered across his visor. "Stay low and find cover," Svaka said to Shazar as she backed away from him. Free of the crippling cold, he leapt to his feet and hurled himself into the fray, heedless of his wounds. One of the Night Lords, engulfed by Zar's witchfire, convulsed and collapsed as his blood was transmuted into pure promethium. The second fell screaming, ebony spikes erupting from his spine and skull as his skeletal system underwent catastrophic mutation. Svaka sprang over his stricken brother, even as Zar turned his full attention upon Vath. Soul Reaver glowing with an ethereal, otherworldly warp light. The Talon Master struck again, and as the two swords met, the light coalesced around the eviscerator, and it exploded like a crack grenade, the force of its destruction blowing Vath backwards into the pyre, and sending dislodged chain teeth whickering through the air like shards of deadly shrapnel. One projectile took out Svaka's right eye before he hit Zar with all the force of a charging amble, the crackling blades of his lightning claw punching through ceramite and carapace to pierce the sorcerer's twin hearts.
Die!
Svaka screamed, putting all his remaining strength into the strike.
Die and be damned! Thalac will never belong to your gods! Ave Dominus Nox!
Yet even as his life was extinguished, the Psyker assailed Svaka's mind again. And this time, it was not visions of the warp that caused the Night Lord to stagger. It was the memories. Memories of another world, of another life. Svaka fell, dragging the dying Chaos Marine down with him, no longer aware of where he was or why he was fighting, for he was no longer a legionary, no longer a Night Lord. He is mortal once more. Weak, helpless, pathetic. A pale, skinny 9-year-old boy clothed in filthy rags, running as fast as his legs can carry him. His single human heart pounding in his ears. His lungs burning with exertion as he flees from the vicious pack of savage gangers, the stolen, half-roasted dog leg clutched tightly in his hand. Hunger gnaws like a sump rat at his empty stomach, even as terror blinds him, reducing him to the mental state of a panicked prey animal. His pursuers shout and whoop as they swiftly close behind him. Svaka runs on, splashing through stagnant puddles before he slips and falls with a cry amongst the piles of trash choking the dark, dingy alleyway, the leg bone flying from his grasp. The gangers swiftly surround him, laughing and jeering. Their teeth are filed into points, and their red-painted knives are drawn for the kill. Svaka kicks and thrashes uselessly, as two of them drag him to his feet and slam him up against a rockcrete wall. The older boys smirk and jostle each other as they debate on what they should do to him.
"Slit open his belly and tear out his guts!"
cries one ganger whose right eye is encircled by a starburst tattoo.
"Cut off his fingers one by one and stuff them down his throat!"
yells another boy with steel studs protruding from his lips and cheeks.
"Flay him alive, just like the Night Haunter used to do,"
snarls a third, his sharpened teeth capped in tarnished silver. Then the leader steps forward. Svaka struggles helplessly against his captors, his fear all but choking him. The gang boss of the Red Knives is well-muscled, and his shaved scalp is inked with intricate Nostroman script. He wears a black, synth leather long coat, and a ruby gemstone is set into the pommel of his dagger. Blinking languidly, he looks Svaka up and down, assessing him like fresh meat upon the butcher's block.
"You're a bold little gutter rat to be stealing food from the mouths of my mates,"
he says at length, sounding more amused than angry. Svaka is too terrified to respond.
"And you run fast too, for such a scrawny brat,"
the gang boss continues, looking thoughtful. Then he turns to his followers.
"What do you say, Red Knives? Should we repaint our blades with his blood, or should we find some other use for him?"
"He's just some whore's nimble-fingered bastard, Hazak. Less than dirt. Let's kill him now, and then we'll have something better than dog to eat."
The boy with the starburst tattoo licks his lips as he speaks, his own hunger evident in his eyes.
"Nah, we'd do good to sell him to Krusk. Everyone knows Krusk's clients pay top coin for kids his age.
Then we can buy up a few of those nice new needle rifles Vizar's got stashed away in the southern warehouse district."
The silver-toothed ganger grins at the thought of acquiring the weapons at Svaka's expense, and winks at him.
"No, we should let him join us."
A clear, youthful voice calls out from the back of the crowd. The gangers murmur in surprise and shift aside as a boy pushes his way past them, a boy only a few years older than Svaka himself. The young ganger's face, though scarred, is bereft of tattoos, and his lank, black hair looks as if it has never once been cut. The butcher's blade he holds in his right hand is unpainted. He is obviously a new blood, an aspiring red knife who hasn't yet been properly bloodied in a turf war to earn the right to be marked with the signature gang tattoos displayed by his comrades. Still, he radiates a quiet lethality, and his eyes are devoid of fear as he comes to stand before his leader.
"What? Are you tired of being the runt of the pack, Thalac?"
Hazak asks condescendingly, tapping the flat of his dagger against the boy's pallid cheek.
Are you lonely? Or are you just sick of doing all the low jobs by yourself?
The Red Knives need new members, Thalac informs him simply, ignoring the threatening blade. Both Hesper and Zeit were killed 3 days ago, and Falaz is dying of that gut wound. The Shadow Skulls and the Gore Feeders claim more of our territory each month. Soon we'll be scattered and hunted down like crippled dogs. The street brat is fast and clever. We could use him. We could teach him how to cut and kill too. I could teach him, if no one else wants to. Then we could at least pretend we have a future. And yes, I am tired of being the runt of the pack. Hasek throws back his head and barks a laugh.
By terror! You've got quite a pair on you, Thalac, I'll give you that much.
He motions to the 2 gangers pinning Svaka to the wall, and they throw him to the ground at Thalac's feet.
Did you hear that, gutter rat? Your life has taken a new turn. You're going to become a Red Knife and put those nifty fingers of yours to good use. Otherwise, I'll personally skin you alive for daring to steal our prey. Understand, new blood?
Svaka stares up at Thalac in astonishment, feeling something that might be hope flare up in his heart. The long-haired boy smiles down at him. It is not a smile of arrogance or cruelty or even of triumph. It is an open, guileless smile that hints at a future bond that will exist solely between the 2 of them. A bond that, unbeknownst to either boy, is destined to last for millennia, long after the Red Knives, Murder Gang, and the night world of Nostramo had both ceased to exist. Yes, Svaka says, his voice barely above a whisper. Thalac extends his free hand, his smile widening. He grips Svaka's bony wrist firmly, helping him to stand. Yes, his abyssal eyes affirm. Telid Svaka came to himself in agonizing increments as his disjointed thoughts slowly coalesced and his mind dragged itself free of the entangling shadows of his half-remembered past life. The Night Lord opened his good eye. Shazar's concerned face immediately swam into view. The old thrall was crouched by his head, carefully cleaning the dried blood from his face with a strip of cloth torn from her cloak and dampened with water from her canteen. She grinned tentatively as he focused on her, pulling back her scarified lips to reveal the few yellow teeth she still possessed.
"Another good fight, Lord,"
she whispered gently, as if trying to comfort him.
"Better than the first one, I think."
The rhino rocked gently as it crunched over a mound of rubble. Svaka lifted his head and looked about him, struggling to stay conscious through a haze of pain and fatigue. He had been stripped of his armor and was lying on his back on the floor of the transport. Vath was seated on his left, along with the 4 surviving members of his squad, one of whom flexed his spiked gauntlets warningly to discourage Svaka from rising. The Talon Master's warplate was scorched, and his gorget and chestplate had been split open by the explosive destruction of his eviscerator. Blood was pooled at his feet, and both of his eye lenses were cracked. The crimson malevolence dulled. Still, he grinned his jackal skull grin, indifferent to the seriousness of his injuries. Tiresias's broadsword was planted upright before him, and the Night Lord's armored fingers gripped the hilt with a fierce possessiveness. Svaka raised his left arm and examined the stump of his severed hand. A thick, dark scab of clotted Laraman cells now encrusted the end of his wrist. He then risked a glance at his stomach and immediately regretted it. The rhino's interior lighting, dim as it was, served only to accentuate the gruesome sight of his exposed entrails.
"That sword is still mine, Vath,"
he gasped, his voice thick and garbled with congealed blood. Vath emitted a harsh, pain-filled noise that might have been a chuckle.
Don't fret now. If Thalac lets you live, I promise I'll give it right back.
You will?
No, of course not. You'll have to fight me for it.
Svaka smiled as his eye flickered shut again.
Good. Now I have something to look forward to.
Vath's voice grew somber.
You know how this is going to end, Telid. Thalac is not going to take the loss of his pet sorcerer lightly. Death will be slow in coming, and you may yet beg for it before he is satisfied.
Svaka coughed violently and tasted fresh blood on his tongue.
That doesn't matter. Haranzar would have seen us all reduced to fanatical midnight-clad word-bearers had I not acted. Besides, Captain Thalac is free now, even if he doesn't realize or accept it. We freed him, Vath. Together, we freed the entire warband, and I thought I was the only legionary who cared.
We are Night Lords, brother.
Vath sounded resigned, almost remorseful.
You know we cannot afford to care. Caring is a weakness, and weakness is the only true sin in this cruel, uncaring galaxy.
The ancient memory resurfaced in Svaka's mind again. Thalac as a boy, smiling with genuine warmth as he extends his hand to help a thieving gutter rat who had earned nothing but death for his weakness.
I should have died a long time ago,
the Night Lord whispered raggedly as Shazar began to weep once more.
We all should have died a long time ago.
Vath did not answer. The rhino rumbled onwards. Around them, the capital city of Sychanthus III burned. Night had come. A night that would never truly end. A night that held no promise of a dawn. Ravaged in mind and body, Telid Svaka sank unresistingly back into its black embrace. His final act of service to the 8th Legion completed. The soothing darkness cradled Conrad Kurz's faithful son, drawing him deeper and deeper into its fathomless depths, and he stands next to Thalac, on the crumbling terrace of a dilapidated Habspire, within sight of Nostramo Quintus's vast spaceport, watching as ships, shuttles and lifters of every description travel in an endless, brilliantly lit procession from the surface to the orbital dockyards high above, and back again. The sight is breathtaking, and for a few minutes the two boys forget the incessant hunger gnawing at their bellies. Then Thalac turns to Svaka, his dark eyes bright with some inner fire, his smile as open and guileless as it had been on the night he'd saved Svaka and changed his fate. He gestures eagerly at the spaceport with his freshly painted red butcher knife, and speaks the words that will see them both damned in ways they cannot even begin to comprehend.
I'm going to join the Legion, Telid. Come with me. We'll escape this hellhole together. Forever. Let's go to the stars. Let's fight in the Great Crusade and become mighty heroes of the Emperor.
A choice is set before him. Svaka does not hesitate, nor does he question Thalac's decision. He does not consider the risks or the consequences or even the possibility of failure. Instead, he simply smiles back at his friend, his only friend, and nods his head.
Yes,
he says, his soft voice barely above a whisper. And the thirsting gods laughed.